Washington's defensive line can make a big impact in the Big Ten.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new video. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, because it all really does help us out a lot. And some breaking news, because as you're listening to this on Tuesday, July 29th, Lars and I will probably be on campus for some media interviews with various members of the football program. So keep an eye out for some of those, which will be dropping mainly on our YouTube page. So make sure you subscribe over there. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today. We're going to talk about the two Huskies in Jonah Coleman and Damon Williams that were named to the Maxwell Award watch list. We're going to talk about some of the biggest storylines that you and I can see coming out of fall camp, which does begin officially on Wednesday. But no storyline is going to be bigger than this defensive line. You got some transfer portal additions. Guys are starting to get healthy in that room. And in this Ryan Walters scheme, it could make a really big impact in this conference.
It really can. I mean, it, no pun intended, has the big feeling of a Big Ten defensive line, which last season you just flat out didn't have. You'll have Zach Durfee back healthy. Jayvon Parker will come back at some point. The emergence of Armon Parker, also somebody we haven't seen in a couple of years. So, and then you add the depth: Simote Pepa, Anterio Thompson, Taulealea, Landen Hatchett. The amount of names that you have where we can just roll through, and we're missing significant players, even just saying those guys that you didn't have last season, or that weren't as up to snuff as they would have been. Because again, when he's being a redshirt freshman, you're not going to lean on him as much. But now, as a sophomore / junior, these guys are all going to be there and be in that rotation. And yeah, you might now look at that line and say, hey, we don't have a Vita Vea. We don't have even a Greg Gaines, right, per se, where Anterio Thompson might fill that role had he been here 2-3 years. But as a plug-and-play guy, you're saying, well, we expect him to play the Greg Gaines-ish role of being that big stuffer in the middle, but we haven't seen it on a year-in, year-out basis. But, man, from what we saw in the spring, it's a reloaded, truly Big Ten caliber defensive line.
So I like everything you're saying there, where I'm glad you mentioned Anterio Thompson, because that was the first name that I really wanted to highlight here, because when we look across this group, I think the guy who's closest to being that Vita Vea, just in terms of a big impact, like all-American level upside kind of player, if there's anybody in this room that has that, it's Jayvon Parker. But we don't know what that's going to look like. Coming off the torn Achilles, obviously Jedd Fisch told Christian Capel that he's going to be limited in fall camp to start for the first couple of weeks, which is a good sign in terms of his recovery. But we'll see how that just kind of continues to progress throughout the month. But with a guy like Anterio Thompson, I think he's the next closest to being, if you just want to say all Big Ten caliber player, because I look at everything he did during spring practice, and I was so impressed with his size, his strength, his athleticism, everything he brought to the table. And when we look at what Ryan Walters' scheme is going to do, it's going to do a really good job of getting these guys on the interior one-on-one matchups. And it's something where, I didn't see a full complement of pass rush moves from him in the spring, but that's okay, because he's the kind of guy where you don't need to rely on him to have 6, 7, 8 sacks at any point this season. You're never going to count on that from any defensive tackle, really, unless their name is Vita Vea. And I look at what he brought to the table this year, and we just saw all that strength that he was able to use to just bull rush opposing guards. And if he can do that and continually just walk players back into the quarterback and collapse the pocket, that alone is something we didn't see at any point last season. And if you're able to do that, you're able to probably find ways to win in other aspects of just the defensive line, whether it be Taulealea, Zach Durfee, somebody else who can just get some kind of pressure. And if you can just do a good job of not letting quarterbacks step up in the pocket, which was a big problem last year because there was no push from the interior, you're going to improve along the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, one improvement helps another, where the guy we leave it out of that is Isaiah Ward, where if Anterio Thompson is collapsing the pocket and forcing the quarterback to step up, you now have Isaiah Ward coming around the other end, or Zach Durfee, like you mentioned. And so those sack numbers that we didn't see, obviously well documented here, I think 15th in the Big Ten with 20 sacks. Only Michigan State, Maryland, and Wisconsin were lower than them. So there's not much you can do worse. But I think that's what the improvement is going to come, where if you're collapsing the pocket, you have your edges have better, it's easier for them to corral the quarterback, where you're talking about you don't have that push. What do we see John Mateer do? Go right up the middle. Like that's, you can have your edges collapse the pocket, but then the pocket collapses. It almost makes a heart shape. And the problem is it's going to break your heart because they're going to go into the end zone. So when you have both together, that's the massive difference in what flat out UW didn't have last season. Just consistently.
And a big part of just on top of that is you didn't see that depth, where I'm glad that was the first thing that you mentioned, because you didn't mention, Omar Khan, who's someone who could take a step forward this season. Bryce Butler being another one who I think this coaching staff was hoping was going to give a little bit more last season. There are so many guys that, and like Simote Pepa and Logan Sagapolu being just the big space eaters in the middle at nose tackle as well, where when you have all of those guys, I don't think you need an all-American caliber player. And it's, I'm not saying that it's going to be an elite top 3, top 5 defensive line or anything like that. But when you have a rotation that's this deep and you're able to continually get fresh bodies on the field, as long as you have 1 or 2 guys who are able to create some kind of pressure and you're still rotating fresh bodies in there, you are going to find a way to have an advantage. And again, that's one of the things that this scheme brings. When you're sending 5 guys at a 50, 55, 60% clip, somewhere in that ballpark, I believe is where Ryan Walters was last season at Purdue. If you're doing that, you are going to find a way to exploit holes. And I'm glad you mentioned Isaiah Ward and Zach Durfee, because if they're able to win one-on-one on the edge, you're still going to find a way to, again, create pressure. And that's where somebody like Anterio Thompson comes in. If Jayvon Parker is able to get back healthy, we know what kind of havoc he can wreak in the middle of the defensive line. And all of those just different things together is what can create a strong defensive line. And as you said, there isn't much lower to get than where Washington was last season. But if you take 15th, because that's where they were in rushing yards allowed per game last season as well. If you can take 15th in both of those stats and make them 7, 8, 9, just somewhere middle of the road, that is not only a significant improvement, but we're probably going to see the offense take a big step forward from that as well, because you're just going to give them extra possessions.
And that's really all you're doing, is you're not saying, hey, let's flip the table. Let's have, 45 sacks, 10 turns. Again, you would like all those numbers, but it's really just about flipping the script enough to give your offense 1 or 2 more possessions that they didn't have. Where how many times last season, and it's one thing I did on a deep dive on Jason Kapusi, if you want to check it out on Huskies Wire, which was go look at his time in Nevada, where their third down defense improved drastically from year 1 to year 2 when he was just a defensive end / defensive line coach, going from, I think, 41% down to 37%, but they took away 10 plus third down attempts and over, I think, 11 third down conversions. So you're seeing a year in, year out improvement. And then you add to that the number of bodies UW has brought in. Once you give him the arsenal and the tools and now the depth that he has to work with, and you pair that with the right scheme that you mentioned, Ryan Walters, like there's so much for Jason Kapusi to unlock, where you have the ability to now win those one-on-one matchups where you're not looking saying, hey, well, if we throw Logan Sagapolu when they're just as a big body to eat up 2 spaces, but he only eats up 1.5. It's like, that's why you have Simote Pepa and Logan Sagapolu and Bryce Butler. Like that's no matter who you end up throwing out there, you can find guys, and then the competition sorts itself out. But it's about the combination of having the bodies and the scheme to fit, which you mentioned. Like that's why Jason Kapusi kind of deserves the benefit of the doubt going into the season. Where I can understand, some people said, hey, he didn't do a lot. Well, he didn't have a lot to work with last season. It's like Brendan Carroll didn't do a lot with the offensive line, and Brendan Carroll was a pretty good offensive line coach. So when you look at the perspective of last season, it's worth keeping into context who they had then versus who you had going into 25. It's a night and day difference.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And one thing that's really important to help this defensive line function is some high-end corner play on the back end. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for you. some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I completely understand that. Some days when I like to go to the driving range, try to get on the course, I'm just not feeling it. And 5-hour energy helps me get back on track. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5-hour energy shots today. So, Lars, there are a couple of storylines that we wanted to get into surrounding fall camp. We want to get to some offensive line stuff in a few minutes, but after talking defensive line, there's no better place to talk about than the secondary, because we look on the outside of this Ryan Walters scheme and we see the biggest, longest, and in my opinion, this is about at the end of fall camp, best pair of cornerbacks in the country in Tacario Davis and Ephesians Prysock. After last season, we know Ephesians Prysock obviously had to struggle with some injuries on the back half of the year and had a surgery that kept him out for all of spring practice. But bringing in a guy like Tacario, who when these two were paired up with John Richardson in 2023 at Arizona, they were one of the best tandems of corners in the country. And that's something I expect we're going to see continue this season, because both guys, this scheme functions at its best with three guys, not even just two. And I think Rashawn Clark is going to be in this conversation by like the midpoint of the season at the very latest. But as we look on the outside at both of these guys, I just think that when this scheme is at its best, it's both players that are on the exterior that are playing press man coverage, because it just frees up so much. When Ryan Walters is going to be blitzing at, let's just call it a 60% clip. I know there were several games where he got to that number last season. Having guys who can hold up for 2, 3, 4 seconds in coverage, obviously 4 is really pushing it at a certain point, but having guys who can hold up that long makes it so much easier on the defensive line to hit home. And this pair of cornerbacks is just perfect for what they need.
And speaking of perfect, I think, like, is there no perfect coordinator secondary coach combo than Ryan Walters and John Richardson? And then shout out to Taylor Mace as well. But, you know, those two especially. Yeah. Working with the experience that John Richardson has working with cornerbacks, not just Tacario and Ephesians at Arizona, but many stops. Like, that was why in that 2022 class that Jedd hypes up so much in Arizona. Go back and look at it. Like, look at the number of bodies, just straight up bodies from that class that ended up popping with this coaching staff. And I think Tacario was the 4-star, maybe Ephesians was one of those two.
Ephesians was the 4-star. Yes.
And that's what's crazy is Tacario ended up being coached into the 4-star caliber. And now I think that having both of them back, we saw Ephesians at times last season play under his ability. Let's call it that. Yeah. Because I think, you know, it's not just having another big opposite guy, you know, on the other side, because Dad held his own. Let's give Dad his stick. I know he's now at UNC and things like that, and fans can feel how they feel about that. But, you know, Dad did his job last season, but I think having that familiarity with Tacario and just knowing, like, cool, I don't have to even think twice. And also, there is a little bit, and we saw it at spring camp, where, you know, last season, Ephesians was the guy being tested. Now this spring, it was Tacario. It's almost like they feed off of each other. And so when, you know, Ephesians sees Tacario succeeding, he's like, hey, I got to step my game up. Whereas last season, there just maybe wasn't that relationship. And that's not on Thad or Ephesians. It just seems like this is the more like, hey, let's get the perfect pairing back together. Let's get the Twin Towers back together, as their nickname was their freshman season at Arizona. And, you know, I think it really feeds into what Ryan Walters wants, because he wants those outside cornerbacks to say, you know what, I'm not helping you guys. Y'all figure it out, because you have so much faith, A, in those guys, and then B, the safeties over the top, Rashawn Clark up the middle in terms of at the nickel, and then the defensive line getting that push. There's enough there to mirror that together where the secondary shouldn't have to hold up for 5, 6, 7 seconds. Because, by the way, there's 30 seconds here. That D-line is also supplanted with linebackers that can get after the quarterback, and X-Ray Alexander, potentially Jacob Manu, whoever you throw in that mix, obviously Buda as well. So you have all three levels checked, where it's not just if the D-line doesn't hold up, there's nothing in the middle, so the secondary has really got to be on a prayer here. It's more of a balance. Hey, if you guys hold up for 2 or 3 seconds, you hold up for a second or two, the secondary holds up for 2 or 3 seconds. That's exactly what you need. And I know for fans, it's like, well, what's the difference between 2 seconds and 4 seconds?
It's a massive difference, yeah.
6 points is the difference here. And we saw it many times last season where Ephesians held up, and then couldn't hold up that third or fourth second. And it was, well, that's how those Penn State, touchdowns and drives continue to go on. And it's also not just touchdown drives. It's not touchdown plays. It's touchdown, third down conversions that lead to touchdowns. It's those continuous drives where, hey, it's 3rd and 7, let's get off the field, and they get an 8 or 9 yard gain. It's that simple, where those are the small differences that are keeping you back.
And that's the value of being able to send, an extra guy, maybe 2 extra guys on the rush. Because one thing I wanted to say before we moved on here is I like the way you put it. I think that's all fantastic, but you left out one position, and that's the safeties. And I don't think you did that, on purpose, but it's something where we're going to see a lot of single high coverage. You're going to see whoever it may be, Mikel Lestine, CJ Christian, Alex McLaughlin, maybe Ryland Allen as well, playing that center fielder role and a single high to certainly give some support, but it's not going to be easy. But when these corners hold up, when they are doing their jobs, it just allows you extra freedom from whichever safety is walking down into the box as well, because that's something we're going to see a lot of from whoever is not in that post safety role over the top. And I think that's going to be CJ Christian most of the time. And having somebody else like that who can play close to the line of scrimmage is going to be asked to play man coverage a lot. Having someone in that role who can also hold up, maybe rush the passer a little bit as well, having just that role in itself is so critical to this defense, because it's a very interesting scheme, because there's not one true perfect way to describe it, but it all plays off of each other so well. So that's something I'm just really excited to watch when we get out to fall camp on Wednesday and on Thursday. I'm also really excited to watch this offensive line battle continue, because I think there are 3 positions that are set in stone right now. Left tackle with Carver Willis, center with Landen Hatchett, and right tackle with Drew Azzopardi. I think there are battles going on at 2 spots. I think Paki Finau is going to win out at left guard. And I look at right guard, and one of the big storylines that I can see coming out by August 30th is Champ Taulealea going to start at right guard?
I understand the emphasis. And again, this is not to pour water on Champ, because when we saw him leaving the stadium in spring, I remember you and I were both following each other back, car to car, and we're like, wait, who is this massive redshirt junior over here? It's like, oh, right, Champ. Oh, okay,
that's a true freshman.
And so from that perspective, I get it. But much like we've been beating this dead horse for years now, almost, it seems like having offensive linemen start as true freshmen is very hard to do. And it's not to take away anything from Champ or even John Mills or throwing any of those guys that you want to put in the mix there. But I think that's why you went and got Geirean Hatchett back from Oklahoma, where you give yourself a stable veteran in a way like Will Rogers last season. Start the season at quarterback, start the season at right guard if you're Geirean Hatchett, and call it the Illinois game, the Purdue game, certainly. Sure. By that point, if Champ ends up getting a couple starts under his belt, because Geirean is either being that 6th MVP offensive lineman, a 6th man in the NBA, he's kind of being that versatile plug-and-play guy, but they really want to excel Champ in that Jonah and mold is, hey, you're our starter for the next couple of years. We want to get you involved soon. But we do have this veteran who does know exactly what to do and is a little more up to speed. Geirean is a little smaller than Champ, not a ton, but just a little bit smaller, I think, in terms of the measurables. So I could see Champ, the size, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. But again, when you have Geirean, especially playing next to Landen for one last season at least, I would certainly expect Geirean to start the season, play through the Ohio State game, play through, call it, what was that, October, the Michigan game. I could see Geirean starting through the Michigan game, and then you come back from that game, and then you reassess from there.
So I certainly see where you're going with that. I think you're right. I think that will be what happens, but it's something where we're going to be talking about this through fall camp is more, in my opinion, why I think we wanted to bring this up, because it's the same thing with John Mills. That was the first thing we said when we saw both those guys. Whoa, those guys are, I can see why, Jedd Fisch wanted them. And I know there were a lot of people who, when Jedd Fisch said at the start of spring ball, we brought in, 4 freshmen on the offensive line that all measured in it north of 6'5" and 340 pounds. We were like, okay. And then seeing them, it was a very different story. But that's part of the point of all this as well, where Geirean, you talked to him as well. And one of the things that he knows is that he just wanted to come back and finish his college career in a place he was familiar with his brother, and whatever comes along with that is great. And he's happy with that. That's a fantastic interview you did that you can find over on our Locked On Huskies YouTube channel as well, where all of those things are really important and, just adds depth to this offensive line, which we didn't see last year as well. But it also, if Champ does end up usurping him earlier in the season than that, I don't think anybody should be surprised. And it's not even just him. It's if John Mills finds a way to force himself into the rotation and he's splitting reps with somebody, like whoever it might be, if it's a guard or maybe they try kicking him out to tackle, which certainly seems to be the long-term plan with him. Those are things to keep an eye on because we know these guys are going to play. The question is when and where for the most part. But Lars, two guys that we know are going to see a lot of big-time action this season got named to the Maxwell Award watch list. So do we start with Damon Williams or do we start with Jonah Coleman here?
Let's start with Jonah just because we can spend an entire show talking about Damon if we really want. No offense to Jonah. Not that we couldn't do the same thing with Jonah. But I do think, let's start with the heartbeat where worst probably explaining the Maxwell Award is kind of like the overall, best player in college football that doesn't win the Heisman, but also usually there tends to be some overlap there as well.
Like Michael Penix in 2023, who did win the Maxwell Award.
Exactly. That's a great comparison there because I think when you look at Jonah, well, first of all, he should be a Doak Walker finalist. Let's make that very clear. And I think Jonah has the ability to be one of the best players in the country, but a lot of that depends on how much is his use rate, Damon, the attempts and growth that Damon's going to have, the offensive line. Like, there's so many other factors that Jonah is reliant upon. Whereas Damon, it's like, well, the second that ball is snapped in his hands, who knows what happens, but that's a good thing because you can run it, pass it, flick it, do whatever. I don't think he's going to punt it. But, aside from that, with the Jake Browning pooch punt, like
legendary.
With Joe, oh my God, never forget. But with Jonah, I think Jonah sets the heartbeat of everything. And I know I've said that from day one when he got here and when I talked to him last spring. It's one of the things he reiterated to me, like, look, I'm the heartbeat of the team. Like, you can just see that. But I just wonder, like, will his usage rate, because of the other factors, limit his total impact at the end of the day?
So I think no. I think it's something where, it's because it's something I know I've been very vocal about, especially he got 216 touches last year. If he ends this season with, let's just say between 170 and 180, I'm not going to be surprised. Play benefits, he's still able to get to 1,000 yards. Like average 5.5, 6.7. So still crazy numbers. It was a big tick down for him. And it's something where if you just downgrade the carries a little bit, you still find a way to get him touches. It's something that can keep him healthy, get everybody else in the room around him better, whether it be Adam Muhammad, Jordan Washington, who we expect to take a step forward this season, Damon, who is going to eat into his total carries. Like these are all things to consider on top of that. But if Jonah can still get to 1,000 yards, and let's say it feels unfair to ever say this, but like, let's say he gets to 6 yards a carry this season, which is just kind of weird to think about sometimes. But if he gets to that number, like those are things that could play into the Maxwell Award, the Doak Walker, as you said, and just also prove what kind of efficient running back he can be for the NFL as well.
And this is why I think early on in the season, Damon won't get the carries and stat padding because it's going to go to guys like Jonah. Because when you get to Big Ten play, you might have to mix in Adam and Jordan Washington and Damon having more design runs or at least getting more carries in Big Ten play. Whereas against Colorado, say UC Davis, even Wazoo. Actually, Wazoo might be the Jonah Coleman game. If you think about it, the more that I think about it, where you look at Jimmy Rogers' style of defense, the style of game that's going to be, that's a perfect Jonah goes for 17, 18 carries, 125 yards, and 2 or 3 touchdowns. And that's the stat pattern you get. It's not stat pattern, but the stat emphasis that you get that you might not get when you play Maryland. And Jonah has 11 carries for 90 yards and maybe a touchdown, where that's not because Maryland's going to be that much greater, but I think the style and the, emphasis might switch a little bit in conference play more as you get into non-conference play. You can kind of do a few more things, give a guy a few more carries.
So, and that's just kind of one of the things we're interested to see, because it's something Jonah talked about with us in the spring as well. Is he was like, yeah, it's kind of weird watching the majority of spring from the sidelines, but I have to sit back and remember that I earned this. So we don't spend a lot of time talking about him during our practice reports that we had in the spring, or we probably won't even do that for the first majority of fall camp, because he just doesn't need the work. He doesn't need the reps. So that's something I'm really curious to see is it going to hold true like that? Or is it just going to be a consistent, hey, the plan is to get you, let's just say it's 15 to 20 touches a week, somewhere in that ballpark. Like there are so many different ways that this could pan out for Jonah this fall. And I'm just excited to watch it because seeing him on the Maxwell list is really awesome for a player who, was an underrated recruit coming out of high school and has developed into one of the best running backs in college football. So we're really excited for that. And I think it's really awesome that Demond is on this list as well, because you look at the other quarterbacks in the Big Ten that are on it. It's Luke Altmaier, it's Drew Aller, it's Nico Iamaleava, and it's Dylan Raiola. So there's a guy who started all of last season in Dylan Raiola as a true freshman. There's the incoming transfer with a lot of talent, and let's see how the accuracy pans out with Nico. And then a pair of seniors in Luke Altmaier and Drew Aller. So I think that this is a testament to everyone is starting to catch on to what Demond Williams brings to the table. And I'm just really excited to watch this play out.
Yeah, for everyone on the Dylan Raiola hype train last season, Demond actually was the better freshman. When you go look at the breakdown of numbers, I forgot who had that. It was like a graphic or whatever, but like Dylan Raiola was below a couple of other quarterbacks, even though he started every single game. I know that probably played a little bit into it. But if I told you that Demond is the best quarterback out of those 5 at the end of the year, I don't think we're surprised. And Now, again, I know that might sound insane right now on July 28th when we're recording this, but we see the vision. We saw it against Louisville in the bowl game where, again, like Demond can make something out of nothing. The UCLA game also as well. 2 seconds is all, a second and a half was all he had in some of those pockets, and he still found a way to have plus yardage at the end of those plays. And so for me, all those little factors go into, Luke Altmaier is kind of the enigma in the room for me. Like, I think he's the one that maybe pops, maybe doesn't. Drew Aller, I like him. I'm just not impressed. Nico, I'm not even going to bother. And Dylan Raiola is the one where, okay, big arm, 6'5". If Demond was 6'5", we're not having this discussion. Like, I feel like, if Demond had the size of not Kyler Murray or Johnny Manziel, he
would have been the number one recruit in the class. Like, he's got that level of talent.
And it wouldn't be close, too. It's not a hype train thing. It's just give the man 2 more inches. Even if he's 6'2", Demond can do so many more things. But it's not the height that limits him. I think it's just the exposure that he didn't get last season with Will going 6 and 7, all those types of things. But it perfectly sets up for that 2015, 2016 run of Jake Browning, the 23 run of Michael Penix. But hey, we know about him. We hear the name, Demond Williams. But and now you're by the end of the season, like, oh, that's why. Oh, that's why some people thought he could lead the Big Ten in total yards, because he has the ability to run and throw and has the receivers and weapons to do it. And now he's got the coach to do it. I think Jedd has now learned a full offseason of, hey, where does Demond excel best? How can I best utilize him? Because Jedd seemed like a kid in a candy store with Demond last season, which hey, he can do all these different things. Let's watch and do it. And it almost seemed like he did too much of everything. Not too much of everything, but in the sense that went wider. Now it's going to be a little more condensed and narrow, where he still has a bunch of things that he can do, but you're not doing the entire operation here.
It's something where because I hear where you're going with that. It's something where now that he is starting playing every game, where last year it was almost an opportunity to showcase him, right? Where we've heard the plan from Jedd several times that it was to get his feet wet in a whole bunch of different situations. I like to reference leaving him out there for a 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 quick slant conversion on a 3rd down to Jeremiah Hunter. I like to reference that play. I like to reference the read option touchdown against Indiana, where it's okay, we're leaving him in for a short amount of time. Let's do something like this. And we're still going to see a lot of those same things this year. But now to where I think you're going with that point is now we're just going to see you continue to build on that and continue to find ways to take advantage of it in a much larger sample size, because it's something where, oh yeah, this is fun, right? Where I like to think about what Tim Tebow's freshman year was at Florida, where it's, oh yeah, it's fun. We have this guy who's just this really unique, talented athlete. So why are we not going to put him out there and run QB power on the goal line and in 3rd and 1 when we need a yard? Yeah, let's put the biggest, best athlete on the field out there. That's not obviously the case with Demond being just not Tim Tebow size, but in terms of his talent, in terms of everything he can do, you found ways to take advantage of it last year. And now it's about honing that and, developing that into a game plan. And we saw that, especially against Louisville, because the Oregon defensive line just ruined anything that you wanted to do in that game last season. But you look at what the plan is for Damon this year. There's so many ways that you can just showcase his athleticism. And that's why it's so cool to see him on the Maxwell list, because people are buying in, people are taking notice of that and saying, okay, yeah, this small sample size, obviously we need to see that over a full season, but seeing what he was able to do with just 2 starts under his belt is such a great sign of where he can go with a full year this season.
And then you think about the complement of guys around him. I think Omari Evans is the one that goes underrated most in all of this, because we didn't see him a ton of spring ball, but just imagine having that true deep threat. A true veteran deep threat who knows how to get open opposite Denzel. So you don't, because a lot of times you saw Damon just before the ball was even snapped, we knew where that ball was going. There was 0.0 chance that ball was going to anybody not named Denzel Boston. Now I don't think you're going to have that as much. And so the ability to grow and find an evolution, because he has the deep ball, he has the quick zip, he has all the tools. Your favorite referencer, 5-tool player in baseball. You got all the ability in the world. Now, can you put that package together? That's the real key for Jedd and Damon this fall, but he's got every ability to do it.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to all the viewers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season. I can say that again because it is back and we're so excited. So please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.